Progressive Era, 1898 to 1920. The era is defined by the reform movements from 1898 to the 1920s, when reform-minded people wanted to better the life of citizens in the U.S. They wanted to correct the problems that were created during the Gilded Age, and they wanted, quote, progress in social, economic, and political areas. One of the key reforms during the Progressive Era was economic reform, where progressives wanted to diminish the power of trust, but leave most of the businesses intact, regulate private business, but not control them. And the underlying assumption was that capitalism's benefits outweighed the harmful effect, and the government's job was to minimize the harmful effects of capitalism. Presidents of the Progressive Era include Teddy Roosevelt, William Taft, and Woodrow Wilson. Teddy Roosevelt was known for his trust busting or breaking up of monopolies and keeping an eye on, quote, good trust to make sure they did not take advantage of consumers. Muckrakers were investigative journalists that exposed the problems in society in an attempt to bring about reform. Teddy Roosevelt actually gave the muckrakers their name, saying they were too busy raking at the muck at their feet and ignored the glories of the heavens above. Progressive legislation. The referendum allows voters to change a law already in place, also done with signatures, and a recall allows voter to remove an elected official from office by holding a new election. During the Progressive Era, the fire safety standards were established. They were passed as a result of the Triangle Shirtwaist Fire. The fire started in an overcrowded sweatshop. The 10-story building only had 2 stairways. The exit doors were locked. 146 people died. Many jumped to their death. Federal legislation that was passed during the Progressive Era include the 16th, the 17th, the 18th, and the 19th Amendment, the Interstate Commerce Act, Meat Inspection Act, and the Pure Food and Drug Act. The 16th Amendment established a graduated income tax. 17th Amendment established a direct election for senators. 18th Amendment placed a prohibition on alcohol, which would later be repealed with the 21st Amendment. And the 19th Amendment gave women the right to vote. Florence Kelley was a key reformer during the time period. She was a social worker at Hull House, fought to end child labor and improve women's work hours, helped to write factory inspection laws, and in the Supreme Court ruled in favor of a 10-hour workday in Muller versus Oregon in 1908. Here we have an image of the conditions that children were working in at the time, prior to children labor laws. Webb Du Bois, co-founder of the NAACP in 1909, was the first African American to receive a doctorate from Harvard, fought and demanded for equal rights for African Americans, encouraged African Americans to attend colleges to develop leadership skills. Booker T. Washington a reformer from the Progressive Era, was an African American leader in the late 1800s till his death in 1915. He founded the Tuskegee Institute in Alabama, and he encouraged African Americans to learn trades. The temperance movement. The Women's Christian Temperance Union, the WCTU, was a group that led the fight against alcohol and wanted prohibition. The group believed that alcohol was responsible for unemployment, crime, and divorce. The movement ultimately led to the passing of the 18th Amendment, which is the prohibition of alcohol. Women's suffrage, which is women's right to vote, which was not accomplished to the passing of the 19th Amendment, which was ratified in 1920. National Women's Suffrage Association, led by Elizabeth Satin, Carrie Catt, and Susan B. Anthony, used a state-by-state approach, which was more popular in the West. Women participating in World War I also furthered their cause. And this concludes our lesson on the Progressive Era.